Thank you all. Thank you very much. So we're about to, as you all eat lunch, we're about to begin the keynote portion of the day. This is really a special occasion for all of us. It represents so much in the relationship between this building and City Hall, between this mission and that mission, and it really is a bridge to all the communities in between. Today we're about to honor our Chancellor, Nancy Cantor. Who has played such a pivotal role at Klein and at Rutgers University Newark and throughout the city of Newark. And so much of that is an outgrowth of a very special relationship between Nancy and the Honorable Ras Baraka, the Mayor of Newark. Mayor Baraka, as you know, is an educator, a poet, author, and the 40th mayor of Newark. He was first elected in 2014, re-elected in 2018 and 2022. And he's a tireless steward of equitable growth and a steadfast partner in with Rutgers University Newark. Their relationship has really been quite special, unlike anything I have personally ever seen, and I and the work of Klein have benefited immensely from that relationship. It is really my privilege to introduce to you all today the Honorable Ras Baraka. Thank you.
All right, I was just about to eat too, but it's all good. Anything for Chancellor Cantor. I think this is well deserving. So Amilcar Cabral, Cape Verdean, who was instrumental in the liberation of Guinea-Bissau, who by trade was an agricultural engineer, a farmer, and he was a poet. That's why I love him so much. He said, always remember that the people are not fighting for ideas, nor for what's in men's minds, but to gain material advantage, to live better and in peace, to benefit from progress and for the better future of their children. He went on to say further that the talk of progress and independence are hollow words devoid of any significance unless they can be translated into real improvement of living conditions. My father put it another way. He would say often that some of us are so revolutionary we are paralyzed, arguing that nothing is radical enough for us to act or build on or align with. Or some of us are so intellectual that we forget that our true job is to actually change the conditions of humanity and advance it. My mother made it even more specific to me. She said of my father that he was an intellectual himself, a writer and an activist. But when he went to the supermarket, nobody ever asked him for a job. But that, in fact, is your job. Every day to find a way to change people's material conditions. She made that very succinct to me. Make their tomorrow more promising than today. To remove obstacles and make ideas come to life. You often hear me say many times that I don't have the luxury of pessimism. That I must be optimistic, that if I'm not optimistic about a future that I see, how can I actually take people to the place that I do not see? It's not enough for me to curse the wind. I actually have to find a way to harness it or prevent it from destroying whatever we are creating. There's something very powerful about giving people hope, the feeling that they could actually win, that their collective energy and push could transform people's lives. So we start with the sentiment of victory on our mind. Realistic and pragmatic, but victory always. No matter how small the win, we have to always start there. Besides, the conditions we find ourselves in cities in America didn't come by happenstance or as an unintended consequence of good intentions. These material conditions were created by greed and racism and a consolidation of wealth that is becoming more concentrated, and a philosophy of scarcity that has driven people into corners and isolation around race, nationality, zip codes, immigration status, or any other thing that can be exploited or excused to excuse the unsustainable policies that give the wealthiest more money and increase burden to working families and marginalized communities. Which is why it's incredibly important to have this conversation around equity, and more important, to create a blueprint and a proving ground to build equity in institutions that exist and create new paradigms that will replace old, outdated ones that perpetuate inequity and has become a very real barrier to growth of any kind. So it's not just enough to write, to speak, to do things, to build your resume, to get awards, to be recognized, to be published. You actually have to change people's conditions. This is why Chancellor Kanter has been such a godsend to us here in Newark. She actually gets that. She understands first that academia works best in full public view, and that its mission is to impact and affect the society, not to just point at it and make pronouncements about it. That academia, ideas, and the battle of ideas have a very real place in the university, but its candor and clamor should be felt outside of the university's walls. When she arrived here, she began to work immediately, as the state did, its disparity study, and found out what we have already known for years, that discrimination actually exists. That black and brown and communities and women businesses were getting almost nothing by way of contracts and procurement. In fact, they had to do this study to prove discrimination, to create policies that gave us preferential treatment, they say, when we already had been getting preferential treatment all the time. When we get pulled over, we are more disproportionately pulled over than anybody else. We're more disproportionately arrested than anybody else. We more disproportionately have poor access to health care than anybody else, to employment, less opportunity for home ownership, and so on and so on and so on. There lies our preferential treatment. But in Newark, we partnered with the anchor institutions, with Chancellor Kanter at the head, to change our procurement practices and hiring practices. Before their study, with the Anchor Collaborative, we brought more local kids into these colleges than ever before. We increased our level of procurement to local businesses. We hired more residents and began to focus workforce development on Newark residents. While many around the country were and are trying to figure out how they can reimagine police departments and policing in the middle of the pandemic of COVID and the pandemic of black murder by police, in Newark, we began convening with the Safer Newark Council that later became the Newark Public Safety Collaborative, and again, under the leadership of Nancy Kanter. They partnered with us to provide real-time data for the police department and our community partners to focus on place-based strategies to help us reduce violence and disrupt the social determinants of crime. They also help us strategize around solutions and opportunities to deploy alternative methods to replace the old and broken strategies that lead to more violence or violence against the community. And in New Jersey, if you didn't know, there's a shortage of almost 300,000 units of housing. And the cost of living is growing rapidly. And in Newark, we're not exempt from that. In fact, we have one of the fastest growing rents than any other place in the country. We are not building fast enough to keep pace with the market. The opposite of us is a place like Austin, Texas, that has built so much housing that the developers themselves are trying to slow down as costs have dropped dramatically and the returns are not as high as they had hoped for. With the help of the Equitable Growth Commission and the data and information from Climb, under the leadership once again of Nancy Kanter, we were able to strengthen our inclusionary zoning ordinance, making it one of the strongest in the state. Makes developers set aside 20% of their units for folks below the specific AMI. And we also focused on community-based development that we can actually control, giving the first right of refusal to nonprofit housing developers that with city property. Creating an acquisition fund to purchase more land to put in the hand of local small and mid-sized developers and nonprofits. Having them partner with each other to begin to rebuild areas of the community that have been disinvested in for decades. and began to keep those areas affordable. We built a land bank and began to use city property to give to people for $1 and take their Section 8 voucher and turn it into home ownership. All of this happening in relationship to Rutgers University and happening while Rutgers is created under the leadership of Chancellor Cantor again, the Honors Living and Learning Lab, which creates a pathway for students that many of ours in Newark have been taking full advantage of, allowing them a clear lane into universities, building a college-going culture in Newark, directly addressing the low number of students that finish high school that make their way to college and actually finish. I know of a young man named Mr. Tariq Roland who was formerly incarcerated, went through our reentry program, worked in DPW, went on Essex County College simultaneously, then was brought into the Honors Living and Learning. He matriculated through there, then got a promotion as a workforce development counselor, and today is now leading the entire workforce department and was instrumental in standing up our new re-engagement center to connect opportunity youth back to educational pathways and opportunities for employment. These are all incredible and, more importantly, sustainable outcomes that were created under the leadership and partnership of Chancellor Nancy Cantor. There are also concrete ways that we have been challenging inequity and trying to penetrate decades of intractable and intentional policy and practice that slows down and more often directly impedes our communities from gaining access to quality health, economic prosperity, social well-being, academic advancement, and just all-around joy. The key thing we have to understand is the word intentional, meaning the conditions that we are facing and trying to address here today were done on purpose and deliberately, and systems created to maintain its current relationship and outcomes. That this is necessary for us to understand in our analysis, because when we consider remedies, that they too must be intentional and deliberate. They must be straight ahead and not come as an unintended consequence or designed to speak to a broad problem, but built to address a specific problem placed on a specific community for a specific purpose. We must address those things. We must also be willing to explain and discuss these things publicly. It's not enough to lay out findings and back away or criticize systems without alternative or talking about things in an institutional way without the opportunity to have real public discourse. This is why I love Chancellor Cantor so much. She clearly understands the public nature of the university, its resources, and the impact it has on the overall superstructure. She uses this with weight and direction, which makes her a real force to be reckoned with, and makes the university useful in a multitude of ways that I've already pointed out. It is not enough for the university to actually just educate students. The university job is to inform the movement and direction of the superstructure. It gives the university force because it has intention and direction. Without intention and without direction, it's just words on paper. What we must also begin to see in a wider way, that the policies that were created to marginalize and undermine Black and brown communities have now begun to burden everybody. They are simply unsustainable. The boundaries that were created in housing and labor and economic growth and creativity, education and development are all suffering. We are all suffering because we have been stuck using old and outdated systems based on exclusion and not inclusion, based on segregation and not diversity, or false superiority and not the power of the collective. Now your children can't live in your own neighborhood because of the policies you put in place to keep Black people out, now keeps everyone out. Not everyone gets this, but Nancy Cantor does. Her work here has been a testimony to that. We applaud you here, and thank you, Rutgers University, and more specifically, Chancellor Cantor, for CLIMB, the Honors Learning Living Lab, the Anchor Collaborative, the Newark Public Safety Collaborative, and so much, much more. We thank you for your insight, your brilliance, your commitment to the collective, your leadership, and more importantly, your friendship. We wish you well in all that you will continue to do and pray you always keep us and the work you did here in mind. Did very real and concrete work in this city that can be duplicated anywhere around the country. Your heart was there, your mind was there, your force was there, your intention was there, and the outcomes are material. And so we just did not experience an intellectual relationship with you. We actually experienced material progress because of your presence in our city. Godspeed to you, Chancellor Cantor, and good luck for everything that you do.
Not speaking.
She is not speaking, and we are not going to force her to, because we appreciate so many things about Nancy Cantor, including who she is, and who she is despite her tremendous power to do all the things that the mayor just described, and that so many of us hold in our hearts and our memories because we've been living it with her for all these years, is also a very humble person who doesn't really care to be embarrassed by having to give remarks.
you.
That's something like this. Oh, and by me, right? But we're going to take one more. We're gonna embarrass you because we have to embarrass you in this sense by leaving you with a token of our thanks. And so Nancy, Klein wants to present you with this plaque in gratitude for all that you have done, all that you've done for us, all that you've done for everyone in this room, and to wish you well on your journey. We're so sorry to see you depart. You've meant everything to us, but we know that good things are in store for you ahead. We'll come visit you and stroll through Central Park
Right.
and recall all these wonderful memories. So thank you. And just so you all know, the inscription reads, and this is so true, we are not who we are without you.
That's right.
Bon appetit. We'll see you at 1:30.